The genesis of Rome is shrouded in a blend of myth and historical fragments rather than definitive certainty. According to Roman tradition, the twins Romulus and Remus were born to the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia and the god Mars. A jealous king, fearing these divinely begotten children, ordered them to be drowned in the Tiber River. However, the river, seemingly aware of their fate, carried them gently downstream to the future site of Rome. There, a she-wolf discovered the abandoned infants and nursed them with her milk until a shepherd, Faustulus, found and raised them as his own. As they matured into strong young men, they learned of their royal lineage and resolved to establish a new settlement on the very banks where they had been saved. A dispute arose between the brothers, and in a moment that would resonate throughout Roman history, Romulus killed Remus, thereby becoming the sole founder of the nascent city, standing atop what would later be known as the Palatine Hill. Romulus delineated the boundaries of Rome with a plough in 753 BC, a date from which Romans would subsequently mark their history. The early settlement was modest, comprising little more than a collection of thatched huts overlooking the Tiber, surrounded by more powerful Etruscan cities to the north and Greek colonies to the south. To bolster his fledgling community, Romulus extended asylum to outlaws, exiles, and refugees from the surrounding areas. This influx, however, created a significant problem: a shortage of women. Romulus addressed this through the infamous episode known as the Rape of the Sabine Women, inviting the neighboring Sabines to a festival and then abducting their daughters to serve as brides for Roman men. For approximately 2.5 centuries following Romulus, Rome was governed by kings. 7 monarchs in total presided over the early city's development, transitioning it from a mere village into a significant regional power. Following Romulus, Numa Pompilius ascended to the throne, remembered as a wise and pious ruler credited with establishing many of Rome's religious traditions and institutions. He instituted the position of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, and founded the Temple of Janus, whose doors were to be closed only during times of peace, a rare occurrence in Roman history. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, expanded Roman territory through warfare against neighboring Alba Longa. Under his dominion, Rome absorbed the Alban population after their defeat, establishing a pattern of assimilation that would prove beneficial throughout Rome's history. The legendary combat between the Horatiae and Curiatii triplets, representing Rome and Alba Longa respectively, dates from this period, a symbolic battle that determined the fate of both cities without a full-scale war. Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, oversaw the construction of Rome's first bridge across the Tiber and established the port city of Ostia at the river's mouth, thereby opening trade routes that would eventually connect Rome to the wider Mediterranean world. He also extended the city's boundaries to include the Janiculum Hill, providing enhanced defense for the growing settlement. With the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, Etruscan influence became noticeably prominent in Roman culture. He initiated the construction of the magnificent Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill and the Circus Maximus for chariot races. The colossal drainage project of the Cloaca Maxima also commenced under his rule, transforming the marshy valley between the hills into what would later become the Roman Forum. Servius Tullius, the sixth king, implemented Rome's inaugural constitution, categorizing citizens into classes based on their wealth and military capabilities. This organizational structure, known as the Centuriate Assembly, would remain a cornerstone of Roman military and political life for centuries. Servius also supervised the construction of the first defensive wall encircling the entire city, encompassing Rome's celebrated 7 hills: the Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Celian. The final king, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, governed as a tyrant. His reign saw impressive building projects, including the completion of the Temple of Jupiter. However, his arrogance and cruelty alienated the Roman nobility. The breaking point arrived when his son, Sextus Tarquinius, raped Lucretia, a virtuous Roman noblewoman. This egregious act sparked a rebellion led by Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's husband, Collatinus. In 509 BC, the monarchy was overthrown. Tarquin and his family fled into exile, and the Roman Republic was born. This novel system of government, explicitly designed to prevent the concentration of power in any single individual, would not only shape Rome's future but also profoundly influence political thought for millennia to come. Reflecting on this foundational period, it becomes clear how Rome's initial experiences molded its character. From its very inception, Rome exhibited remarkable adaptability, assimilating influences from both the Etruscans and Greeks while simultaneously forging its own distinct identity. The early Romans established enduring traditions of military discipline, practical engineering, and systematic legal organization, which would serve as the bedrock for their subsequent empire. The city, initially a modest cluster of villages, expanded to encompass multiple settlements across its 7 hills, interconnected by paths that would evolve into Rome's renowned streets. By the conclusion of the monarchy, the population had burgeoned to perhaps 35,000 people, making it one of the largest urban centers in central Italy, albeit still modest in comparison to its future grandeur. Roman society during this nascent period was structured around the family unit, with the paterfamilias, the male head of the household, wielding nearly absolute authority over his dependents. Religious observance was meticulous, as Romans believed that proper rituals maintained the Pax Deorum, or peace with the gods, which was deemed essential for the city's prosperity. As the last king of Rome departed into exile, the populace stood at the precipice of a new era. The monarchy, which had guided the city's early expansion, was replaced by a bold governmental experiment that would determine Rome's destiny for the ensuing 5 centuries. The newly established republic was meticulously crafted to avert the concentration of power that had culminated in the tyranny of Tarquinius Superbus. 2 annually elected magistrates, known as consuls, superseded the king, each possessing the authority to veto the other's decisions. This ingenious system ensured that no single individual could dominate Roman politics. Supporting these consuls was the Senate, a council of elders drawn from noble families, whose counsel carried immense weight despite lacking formal legislative power. The nascent republic immediately confronted existential threats. The exiled king actively sought alliances among neighboring cities, while the formidable Etruscan Lord Lars Porsena laid siege to Rome. According to popular legend, a Roman hero named Horatius Cockle single-handedly defended a bridge against the Etruscan army while his comrades simultaneously destroyed it behind him, thus saving the city from capture. Rome's internal politics proved to be as formidable a challenge as its external adversaries. The Republic was initially dominated by patricians, hereditary nobles who held sway over both political and religious institutions. The majority of citizens, known as plebeians, found themselves disenfranchised from power and frequently ensnared in debt bondage to patrician landowners. This inherent tension between the orders would profoundly shape Roman politics for centuries. The first major social crisis arose when plebeian soldiers, the very backbone of Rome's military might, orchestrated a withdrawal from the city to the Sacred Mount, an event widely regarded as history's first recorded general strike. This drastic and unprecedented action compelled the patricians to establish the office of tribune of the plebs, magistrates who possessed the crucial power to veto any legislation deemed detrimental to plebeian interests. Tribunes were declared sacrosanct, meaning that anyone who harmed them faced both religious condemnation and the penalty of death. The subsequent significant development was the codification of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written law code, prominently displayed in the Forum for all to see. These laws brought much-needed transparency to what had previously been secretive legal procedures, largely controlled by patricians, although still favoring the elite in many respects. The 12 Tables represented a pivotal stride towards greater equality under the law and firmly established the fundamental principle that laws should be public knowledge. As Rome progressively resolved these internal challenges, it concurrently expanded its influence throughout central Italy. The city engaged in numerous wars against its neighboring peoples, including the Volsci, Equi, Sabines, and most significantly, the Etruscans. The conquest of Veii, a prosperous Etruscan city located just 12 miles to the north, effectively doubled the territory under Roman control. This period of expansion, however, suffered a devastating setback when Celtic Gauls decisively defeated the Roman army at the Allia River and subsequently proceeded to sack Rome itself. The majority of the city was razed, although defenders managed to hold out on the Palatine Hill. According to popular legend, sacred geese residing in the temple of Juno alerted the Romans to a surprise night attack, thereby saving the citadel. The Gauls eventually withdrew after receiving a substantial ransom of gold. But the traumatic memory of this disaster would persist in Roman consciousness for centuries to come. Remarkably, Rome recuperated swiftly from this catastrophe. The city was meticulously rebuilt, and stronger defensive walls were erected. Within mere decades, Rome had defeated the Latin League, integrating these ethnically related peoples into its burgeoning state. Some Latin communities were granted full Roman citizenship, while others received partial rights, thus establishing patterns of graduated citizenship that would become a defining characteristic of Roman statecraft. The middle years of the Republic witnessed significant political reforms. The Lex Licinius Sextia, for instance, mandated that one consul must be a plebeian, effectively opening the highest office to non-patricians. Over the ensuing decades, plebeians progressively gained access to all major magistracies and religious offices, while wealth, rather than birth, increasingly determined political opportunity. This process of social integration played a crucial role in helping Rome circumvent the destructive class conflicts that plagued many contemporary Greek city-states. Rome's steadily growing power inevitably led to conflicts with other regional powers. Through 3 arduous wars against the mountain peoples of central Italy, known as the Samnites, Rome extended its dominion from coast to coast across the Italian peninsula. As Rome consolidated its position in central and southern Italy, it encountered the sophisticated Greek cities of Magna Graecia. The most powerful among these, Tarentum, perceived Roman expansion as a direct threat and sought assistance from Pyrrhus, the king of Epirus in Greece. Pyrrhus arrived in Italy with a formidable force, notably including war elephants, creatures previously unknown to the Romans. Despite achieving several victories against Roman armies, Pyrrhus sustained such heavy casualties that these Pyrrhic victories severely depleted his forces. After an unsuccessful campaign in Sicily, Pyrrhus returned to Greece, leaving the Greek cities to confront Rome unaided. Shortly thereafter, Tarentum fell, and Rome subsequently controlled the entire Italian peninsula south of the Po River. Rome's governance of this newly formed Italian confederacy demonstrated remarkable foresight and wisdom, while maintaining firm control over foreign policy and military affairs. Rome allowed its allies to retain a considerable degree of local autonomy. The strategic extension of various grades of citizenship and legal rights provided strong incentives for loyalty. Furthermore, Roman colonies strategically placed throughout the peninsula served a dual purpose: rewarding veterans with land while simultaneously establishing vital military outposts. This Italian alliance system would furnish Rome with manpower and resources that far surpassed any rival in the Mediterranean world, proving to be a decisive advantage in the numerous conflicts that lay ahead. A united Italy represented a geopolitical revolution in the ancient world. A large territorial state characterized by centralized leadership, yet flexible enough to accommodate local diversity. Rome's strategic focus soon extended beyond the Italian peninsula to Sicily, where Carthage, a formidable maritime empire headquartered in North Africa, exerted control over the western portion of the island. When a contingent of Italian mercenaries, known as Mamertines, requested Roman protection against both Syracusans and Carthaginians in Sicily, Rome faced a momentous decision. Intervention would inevitably lead to war with Carthage, a formidable naval power possessing centuries of maritime expertise, a capability that Rome conspicuously lacked. Nevertheless, the Senate's decision to accede to the Mamertine's appeal precipitated the First Punic War. This protracted conflict compelled Rome to develop its naval capabilities from their very rudimentary beginnings. Following initial defeats, the Romans ingeniously captured a Carthaginian ship and utilized it as a blueprint to construct their own fleet. They subsequently equipped these vessels with a corvus, a movable boarding bridge that enabled Roman soldiers to leverage their superior infantry skills in naval engagements. Despite suffering catastrophic losses due to both severe storms and numerous battles, Roman persistence ultimately prevailed. Carthage was forced to cede Sicily to Rome and pay a substantial indemnity. The Second Punic War brought Rome closer to utter destruction than any conflict since the Gallic sack. The brilliant Carthaginian general, Hannibal Barca, led an army, including war elephants, from Spain across the Alps into Italy. He inflicted 3 catastrophic defeats upon Roman armies at the Trebia River, Lake Trasimene, and most devastatingly, at Cannae, where an estimated 50,000 Romans perished in a single day. Despite these profound disasters, Rome steadfastly refused to surrender. While Hannibal campaigned through Italy, attracting allies from disaffected Roman subjects, Rome indefatigably raised new armies. The general Quintus Fabius Maximus adopted cautious delaying tactics, assiduously avoiding direct confrontation, while a young commander named Scipio aggressively carried the war to Spain and then directly to Africa, confronted with a direct threat to Carthage itself. Hannibal was compelled to withdraw from Italy. At the decisive Battle of Zama, Scipio, now honorifically known as Africanus, decisively defeated Hannibal, thereby bringing the war to an end. Carthage was forced to surrender its navy, its overseas territories, and its political independence, effectively becoming a Roman tributary state. Victory over Carthage irrevocably established Rome as the preeminent power in the western Mediterranean. Roman attention subsequently shifted eastward to the Hellenistic kingdoms that had emerged from Alexander the Great's fragmented empire. The Roman legions successfully defeated King Philip V of Macedon and subsequently overcame the Seleucid king Antiochus III at Thermopylae and Magnesia. The ancient kingdom of Macedon was partitioned into 4 republics under direct Roman supervision. Greece itself eventually came under direct Roman rule. In the same year, a Third Punic War concluded with the complete and utter destruction of Carthage. These extensive conquests profoundly reshaped Roman society. Enormous wealth flowed into Italy from the newly acquired provinces, significantly enriching both the state treasury and private individuals. Slaves captured in war became abundant, fundamentally altering the nature of Italian agriculture. As small farms gradually gave way to vast estates worked by slave labor, many displaced rural citizens migrated to Rome, leading to considerable social tensions in the overcrowded capital. The Republican political system, originally conceived for a small city-state, now struggled immensely to effectively administer a vast Mediterranean empire. Governors dispatched to rule the provinces frequently exploited their positions for personal enrichment. Successful generals commanded the fervent loyalty of their troops, thereby creating potential threats to civilian authority. The traditional Roman values of simplicity, duty, and self-sacrifice, collectively known as mos maiorum or the way of the elders, appeared to wane as luxury and unchecked ambition increasingly permeated Roman society. These profound changes inexorably set the stage for the tumultuous final century of the Roman Republic. Tiberius Gracchus, elected tribune, proposed the radical redistribution of public land to alleviate rural poverty. His legislation provoked fierce opposition from wealthy senators, who ultimately orchestrated his murder, the first political assassination in Rome in centuries. A decade later, his brother Gaius Gracchus met a similar tragic fate after proposing even more radical reforms, including grain subsidies for urban citizens. These pivotal events irrevocably shattered the traditional consensus of the ruling elite and unfortunately established political violence as a recurrent tool in Roman politics. In the ensuing decades, ambitious generals such as Marius and Sulla repeatedly leveraged their military power to intervene in political disputes. Sulla's audacious march on Rome marked the first time a Roman general turned his army against the city itself, after triumphing over his rivals in a brutal civil war. Sulla had himself appointed dictator and conducted systematic purges of his enemies through proscription lists, public postings explicitly naming those to be executed and their property confiscated. Although Sulla eventually retired, his actions established a dangerous precedent. Subsequently, three powerful men, Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, formed an unofficial political coalition known as the First Triumvirate to collectively dominate Roman politics. Caesar shrewdly secured command in Gaul, where his brilliant military campaigns led to the conquest of modern France and a brief invasion of Britain, earning him unprecedented wealth, invaluable military experience, and immense popularity. When the alliance inevitably fractured, the Senate sided with Pompey against Caesar. Ordered to relinquish his command, Caesar instead audaciously crossed the Rubicon River with his army, thereby igniting civil war with his famous declaration, Alia iacta est *, the die is cast. After decisively defeating Pompey's forces, Caesar became dictator of Rome, implementing numerous reforms, including a new calendar. However, his escalating honors and lifetime dictatorship greatly alarmed Republicans, who perceived him as aspiring to monarchy. On the Ides of March, conspirators led by Brutus and Cassius assassinated Caesar in the Senate House. Rather than restoring the Republic, Caesar's murder triggered a renewed wave of civil war. His adopted son Octavian allied with Mark Antony and Lepidus, forming the Second Triumvirate, with the express purpose of hunting down Caesar's assassins. After decisively defeating Brutus and Cassius at Philippi, the triumvirs divided the Roman world among themselves. Inevitable tensions soon emerged, particularly between Octavian, who controlled the West, and Antony, who governed the East and notably allied himself with Queen Cleopatra VII of Egypt. The final confrontation occurred at Actium, where Octavian's forces, under the command of Agrippa, comprehensively defeated the combined fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. The lovers subsequently fled to Egypt, where they later committed suicide. Octavian, now the sole ruler of Rome's vast territories, meticulously avoided Caesar's critical mistakes. While consolidating unprecedented personal power, he carefully maintained republican facades, referring to himself as princeps, or first citizen, rather than adopting the titles of king or dictator. The Senate ultimately bestowed upon him the honorific title Augustus, a moment that effectively marked the end of the Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. The Republic's legacy was undeniably complex. Its intricate constitutional balance had ultimately failed to prevent civil war and the emergence of dictatorship. Nevertheless, during its 5-century span, Rome had undergone a remarkable evolution from a small Italian city-state to the undisputed master of the Mediterranean world. Republican institutions, though diminished in substance, would persist in name under the emperors, and republican ideals of liberty, civic duty, and constitutional government would continue to echo through Western political thought for millennia to come. As Octavian addressed the Senate in January of 27 BC, Rome found itself at a profound crossroads. The republic that had governed for 5 centuries lay shattered after decades of relentless civil war. Yet, instead of overtly claiming monarchy, Octavian executed a meticulously choreographed political maneuver. He publicly announced the restoration of power to the Senate and the people of Rome, seemingly relinquishing the extraordinary authority he had accumulated. The Senate, now largely filled with his loyal supporters, responded by granting him the honorific name Augustus, a title imbued with profound religious overtones, suggesting one who is revered or sacred. They further bestowed upon him a carefully assembled package of powers: command of key provinces where legions were stationed, tribunician authority, which provided him with veto power, and numerous other significant privileges. This pivotal moment marked the birth of what historians now refer to as the Principate, a system where Augustus ruled as the first citizen, rather than an overt king. Meticulously maintaining the facade of republican government, while simultaneously wielding unprecedented personal power, Augustus would reign for an impressive 41 years. Meticulously establishing administrative and governance patterns that would define Roman imperial rule for centuries to come. He strategically reduced the size of the vast Roman army from 60 legions to a more manageable 28, settling loyal veterans in colonies strategically located throughout Italy and the provinces. He undertook a comprehensive reform of the tax system, established an efficient postal service, created dedicated firefighting cohorts, and organized a permanent police force in Rome. His extensive building projects utterly transformed the capital. So profound was his impact that he famously boasted of inheriting Rome as a city of brick and leaving it a city of marble. In matters of foreign policy, Augustus diligently secured and expanded Roman frontiers. Germanic tribes were systematically pushed back beyond the Rhine, while the empire's eastern boundary was secured through skillful diplomacy with the Parthian Empire. Spain was finally fully conquered after centuries of intermittent resistance, and the Danube River became Rome's definitive northern frontier in Europe. Perhaps most crucially, Augustus ingeniously devised and implemented a stable system of imperial succession, a critical element that had eluded the Republic in its tumultuous final decades. Lacking a biological son, he gradually elevated his stepson, Tiberius, to a position of prominence, thereby ensuring a smooth transfer of power upon his own death. Tiberius, a capable general but a notably reluctant ruler, initiated a dynasty known as the Julio-Claudians, which would govern Rome for more than 50 years. His early rule was characterized by competence and stability, but it progressively darkened after he withdrew to the secluded island of Capri, effectively ceding affairs of state to the ambitious Praetorian prefect, Sejanus. After uncovering Sejanus's audacious plot to seize power, Tiberius unleashed a wave of treason trials that instilled widespread fear throughout the Roman aristocracy. Tiberius was succeeded by his grandnephew, Caligula, whose initial promise as a ruler rapidly degenerated into apparent madness. Stories of his egregious excesses, profound cruelty, and bizarre behavior, including his alleged plan to appoint his horse as a consul, may be exaggerated. But his assassination after a mere 4 years of rule unequivocally speaks to his profound unpopularity among the Roman elite. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite household troops, then controversially elevated Claudius to the throne, despite enduring physical disabilities that had led his own family to largely sideline him. Claudius remarkably proved to be an exceptionally able administrator. During his 13-year reign, he significantly expanded the empire, conquering Britain and incorporating new provinces in the east. He also judiciously extended Roman citizenship more widely and admitted Gauls to the esteemed Senate, wisely recognizing that Rome's long-term future lay in the systematic integration of its provinces rather than exclusive Italian domination. The Julio-Claudian dynasty ultimately concluded with Nero, who initially commenced his reign promisingly under the sagacious guidance of the philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus. However, as he asserted his independence, his rule progressively devolved into blatant tyranny. He orchestrated the murder of his own mother Agrippina, reportedly kicked his pregnant wife to death, and infamously persecuted Christians after the Great Fire of Rome. His escalating unpopularity inevitably led to widespread revolts, and Nero ultimately committed suicide, reputedly lamenting, "What an artist dies in me!" Nero's death precipitated a period of intense instability known as the Year of the Four Emperors. In rapid succession, the generals Galba, Otho, and Vitellius each claimed the throne, only to be overthrown by subsequent military revolts. Finally, Vespasian, commanding the eastern legions, emerged victorious, establishing the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian successfully restored stability to the empire during his 10-year reign. a man of humble origins with a pragmatic approach to governance. He diligently restored fiscal responsibility after Nero's notorious extravagance. His most enduring architectural legacy was the commencement of construction on the Flavian Amphitheatre, now famously known as the Colosseum, built on the site of Nero's opulent palace as a grand gift to the Roman people. His eldest son, Titus, succeeded him just months before the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which tragically destroyed the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Titus handled this and other calamities, including a destructive fire in Rome, with such profound compassion that he was widely mourned upon his death after a mere 2 years of rule. The final Flavian emperor was Domitian, whose 15-year reign witnessed significant military activity along the Danube frontier and in Britain. While an effective administrator, his autocratic tendencies alienated the influential Senate. His assassination brought the Flavian dynasty to an end. The Senate then made the unprecedented decision to select one of its own esteemed members, the elderly Nerva, as emperor. With no natural heir and limited military backing, Nerva wisely adopted the popular general Trajan as his successor, thereby establishing a pattern of adoptive succession that would serve Rome brilliantly for nearly a century. Trajan, born in Spain, became the first emperor from outside Italy. His remarkable 19-year reign saw the Roman Empire reach its greatest territorial extent. He conquered Dacia, roughly equivalent to modern Romania, incorporating its rich gold mines into the empire. His most ambitious military campaign resulted in the annexation of Armenia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Parthia, briefly extending Roman rule to the Persian Gulf. Although some of these eastern conquests would be subsequently relinquished by his successor, they represented the high watermark of Roman expansion. Beyond his military glory, Trajan was widely celebrated for his astute domestic policies. His extensive building programs included a monumental forum in Rome and numerous public works projects throughout the provinces. He established the Alimenta, a welfare program providing essential support for impoverished children in Italy, and was generally regarded, even by later Romans, as the optimal emperor, against whom all others were measured. On his deathbed, Trajan may have formally adopted his relative Hadrian, though some contemporaries suspected the adoption was fabricated by Hadrian's ambitious supporters. Regardless, Hadrian became emperor and immediately initiated a significant shift in imperial policy. Recognizing that the empire had reached its practical limits, he wisely withdrew from Trajan's recent eastern conquests and focused instead on consolidation and internal strengthening rather than continued expansion. Hadrian spent more than half of his 21-year reign extensively traveling throughout the provinces, often walking on foot alongside his troops while meticulously inspecting frontier defenses. In Britain, he famously ordered the construction of a massive wall spanning the island's narrow northern waist, creating an imposing barrier against tribal incursions that remains partially intact to this day. Similar frontier fortifications were reinforced throughout the empire, establishing clear and defensible boundaries in place of relentless expansion. A profound admirer of Greek culture, who notably wore a beard in the Hellenic fashion unlike his clean-shaven predecessors, Hadrian spent extensive periods in Athens, overseeing the completion of the colossal temple of Olympian Zeus, which had been commenced centuries earlier. His enduring architectural legacy in Rome included the Pantheon, with its revolutionary concrete dome, which still stands today as a magnificent testament to Roman engineering brilliance. Hadrian's chosen successor, Antoninus Pius, presided over a remarkably peaceful 23-year reign. His tenure was notably free from major wars or internal disturbances, allowing the empire to flourish and prosper, continuing the established tradition of adoptive succession. Antoninus meticulously selected Marcus Aurelius as his heir, with the explicit provision that Marcus, in turn, adopt Lucius Verus as co-emperor. Marcus Aurelius, a devout Stoic philosopher whose profound meditations remain widely read and admired today, found his reign largely dominated by significant military challenges. despite his inherently philosophical disposition. Germanic tribes, possibly driven westward by population movements deeper within Europe and Asia, began to exert unprecedented pressure on the Roman frontiers along the Danube in far greater numbers than ever before. While Marcus and Lucius initially ruled jointly, Lucius's untimely death left Marcus as sole commander during increasingly difficult times. Beyond external threats, the empire grappled with a devastating pandemic, subsequently known as the Antonine Plague, possibly smallpox, which was brought back by troops returning from campaigns in the east. This demographic catastrophe claimed the lives of perhaps 5 million people throughout Roman territories, severely weakening both military and economic strength at a truly critical juncture. Despite these immense challenges, Marcus Aurelius steadfastly maintained the empire's frontiers and even planned to establish new provinces beyond the Danube before his eventual death. Unlike his predecessors, who consistently chose the most qualified successor through adoption, Marcus controversially allowed his biological son, Commodus, to succeed him, a decision that would ultimately have dire consequences for Rome. Looking back across this 2-century span, from the accession of Augustus to the death of Marcus Aurelius, this era unequivocally represents the Roman Empire at its absolute zenith. The population reached an estimated 70 million people, living in relative security under the pervasive Pax Romana, or Roman peace. A vast and intricate network of roads, totaling over 250,000 miles, greatly facilitated trade, communication, and military movement throughout the entire Mediterranean basin and beyond. Cities flourished, equipped with public amenities previously unknown in earlier ages, such as sophisticated aqueducts delivering fresh water, elaborate public baths, theaters, and grand forums. Roman law, which grew increasingly sophisticated and humane, was administered across 3 continents. Literature and art also thrived during this golden period. Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, Ovid's imaginative metamorphoses, the incisive histories of Tacitus, the detailed biographies of Suetonius, and the eloquent letters of Pliny the Younger all date from this remarkably productive era. While innovations in science notably lagged behind literary achievements, practical knowledge in fields such as architecture, engineering, agriculture, and medicine significantly enhanced the daily lives of Romans, making their existence more comfortable than for any large population before them. Perhaps most significantly, this period witnessed the birth and initial spread of Christianity. Jesus of Nazareth lived and died during the reign of Tiberius, and the new religion gradually disseminated throughout the empire despite sporadic periods of persecution. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, Christian communities had been established in most major cities, laying the foundational groundwork for profound developments that would irrevocably transform the later empire. The early empire also experienced the increasing importance of the provinces. Italy gradually lost its privileged position as emperors from Spain and other regions beyond Italy assumed the imperial purple. Citizenship was progressively extended more widely, culminating generations later in its grant to all free inhabitants of the empire. Extensive trade networks connected distant regions, with exotic goods flowing from as far away as India and China into vibrant Roman markets. This remarkable era of stability and prosperity was underpinned by several crucial pillars. The Augustan settlement that skillfully balanced imperial power with a profound respect for tradition, the system of adoptive succession that consistently produced a series of capable rulers, frontiers that were sufficiently secure to prevent major invasions, an economy that, despite its limitations by modern standards, generated enough surplus to sustain a sophisticated urban civilization, and a formidable standing army of nearly 400,000 men. As Marcus Aurelius drew his final breath on the Danubian frontier, none could foresee that this golden age was inexorably drawing to a close. The ascension of Commodus would tragically mark the beginning of profound troubles that would test the very resilience of the imperial system in ways its original creators could never have imagined. Yet, the enduring achievements of the early empire would resonate through the centuries, creating an ideal of peace, prosperity. An effective governance that would continue to inspire civilizations long after Rome itself had politically fallen. The golden age of the Roman Empire began to dim irrevocably as Commodus assumed the imperial purple following the death of his revered father, Marcus Aurelius. Unlike his philosophical and dutiful father, Commodus evinced little genuine interest in the arduous burdens of governance. Handsome and athletically inclined, he greatly preferred the gladiatorial arena to the solemn council chamber. He frequently participated in staged combats, ostentatiously charging the imperial treasury enormous sums for his public appearances and audaciously boasting of thousands of contrived victories against opponents who, naturally, dared not defeat him. While Commodus indulged his increasingly bizarre fantasies, even renaming Rome Colonia Commodiana, and styling himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, the complex machinery of empire continued to function, largely due to the diligent efforts of experienced administrators. Yet, his capricious executions of senators and other high-ranking officials created a pervasive climate of fear and insecurity. On the final day of the year, he was brutally strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, Narcissus, as part of a conspiracy involving his inner circle, who rightly feared they would be the next to face his unpredictable wrath. After Commodus's assassination, the venerable General Pertinax was reluctantly elevated to the throne by the Senate. His earnest attempts to restore discipline among the notoriously unruly Praetorian Guard proved fatal. They murdered him after a mere 3 months when he steadfastly refused their exorbitant demands for a special bonus. What ensued was arguably the most shameful episode in Roman history. The Praetorians literally auctioned the empire to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus, an extraordinarily wealthy senator, ultimately won this dubious honor. But his ignominious reign lasted a mere 66 days. Provincial armies, utterly disgusted by the scandalous events unfolding in Rome, promptly put forward their own respected commanders as imperial candidates. From this profound chaos emerged Septimius Severus, the astute commander of the Pannonian legions, who marched decisively on Rome, disbanded the disgraced Praetorians, and established a new dynasty. Severus was a supremely capable soldier who secured his precarious position through a combination of swift military victories and the ruthless elimination of his rivals. Born in Leptis Magna in North Africa, he was the first emperor from that continent and reportedly spoke Latin with a distinct accent. His reign ushered in significant changes to Roman governance, most notably the increasing militarization of the administration and a greater reliance on equestrians rather than senators for key bureaucratic positions. During his 18-year rule, Severus conducted successful military campaigns in the east against the Parthian Empire, notably creating the new province of Mesopotamia with its rich farmlands. He also traveled to Britain to strengthen Hadrian's Wall and campaigned extensively against the Caledonians in Scotland. It was there, in the northern outpost of Eboracum, modern York, that he died, reportedly advising his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn everyone else. His sons, Caracalla and Geta, were intended to rule jointly, but their deep-seated hatred for each other rendered cooperation utterly impossible. Within a year, Caracalla had his brother brutally murdered in their own mother's arms and immediately ordered a damnatio memoriae, effectively erasing Geta from all official records and monuments. Caracalla then embarked on a reign of terror against his brother's remaining supporters. Despite his profound cruelty, Caracalla issued one of the most historically significant edicts in Roman history, the Constitutio Antoniniana, which granted Roman citizenship to all free men within the empire. While partially motivated by a desire to increase tax revenue, this decree formally codified the fundamental evolution of Rome from a mere city-state to a truly universal empire, where citizenship was now defined by law rather than by ethnic origin. Caracalla was ultimately assassinated while campaigning in the east, stabbed to death by a disgruntled soldier as he relieved himself along a road. The Severian dynasty continued through a series of rulers connected by the remarkable women of the family, particularly Julia Maesa, sister-in-law of Septimius Severus, who skillfully engineered the rise of her grandsons Elagabalus and later Alexander Severus. Elagabalus deeply scandalized Rome with his fervent religious devotion to the Eastern sun god, whose name he bore. Attempting to elevate this foreign cult to supremacy over traditional Roman worship, his alleged effeminacy, including reports that he married a male charioteer, further alienated traditional Romans. After a mere 4 years, the Praetorians murdered him and contemptuously threw his body into the Tiber River. Alexander Severus, just 13 years old when he ascended the throne, ruled under the regency of his astute mother, Julia Mamaea. His 13-year reign saw earnest attempts to restore good relations with the Senate and traditional Roman values. But formidable military challenges were rapidly mounting. A new and aggressive Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, had replaced the Parthians, and now posed a far greater threat in the east. Meanwhile, Germanic tribes intensified their pressure on the Rhine and Danube frontiers. When Alexander controversially negotiated with Germanic tribes rather than engaging them in battle, his frustrated troops mutinied and proclaimed Maximinus Thrax, a giant former shepherd from Thrace, as emperor. Maximinus represented a new archetype of emperor. A soldier of undeniably humble origins with little formal education or aristocratic refinement, who had risen solely through military merit. Although an effective general, his harsh taxation policies, implemented to fund military campaigns, made him deeply unpopular with civilians. The Senate, desperate to restore its dwindling influence, supported a revolt led by the elderly Governor Gordian and his son in Africa. When they were swiftly defeated, the Senate unprecedentedly appointed 2 of their own members, Pupienus and Balbinus, as co-emperors. Maximinus marched on Italy, but was brutally murdered by his own troops as they besieged Aquileia. The Senate's appointees were themselves soon killed by the Praetorian Guard, who then elevated the 13-year-old Gordian III, grandson of the earlier claimant. This dizzying sequence of emperors and usurpers inaugurated what historians aptly term the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next few turbulent decades, at least 26 men claimed the imperial title, most ruling for just a few precarious years before meeting violent ends. The Roman world seemed to be unraveling as the imperial office became the coveted prize in an endless, destructive military lottery. External threats significantly compounded the internal chaos. The Emperor Decius and his son tragically died fighting Goths at the Battle of Abritus, the first Roman emperor to fall in battle against foreign enemies. The Emperor Valerian suffered an even more ignominious fate. Captured alive by the Sasanian Persian king Shapuri and allegedly used as a human footstool before reportedly being skinned after death and stuffed as a grotesque trophy. With central authority rapidly collapsing, the empire began to visibly fragment. In the west, a Gallic empire, encompassing Gaul, Britain, and parts of Spain broke away under a succession of local rulers. In the east, the prosperous desert trading city of Palmyra, under the leadership of Queen Zenobia, established control over provinces stretching from Egypt to Asia Minor. Economic crisis simultaneously accompanied this political disintegration as the currency was repeatedly debased to pay the ever-increasing armies, triggering severe and widespread inflation. It seemed Rome's 1,000-year story might tragically be approaching its definitive end. Yet, even in this darkest hour, resilient structures and remarkably capable individuals emerged to pull the empire back from the very brink of collapse. The crucial turning point arrived with the accession of Claudius II Gothicus. In his brief 2-year reign, he decisively defeated Gothic invaders in the Balkans, so triumphantly that he earned the honorific title, Gothicus, although he succumbed to plague. His vital work was continued by Aurelian, who was acclaimed by his loyal troops following Claudius's death. Aurelian's remarkable 5-year reign earned him the profound title, Restorer of the World. He decisively defeated the Palmyrene Empire, famously bringing Queen Zenobia to Rome in golden chains for his magnificent triumph. He then successfully recovered the breakaway Gallic provinces, thereby reunifying the fractured empire. To protect Rome itself from increasingly frequent barbarian raids, he oversaw the construction of a massive new defensive wall circuit, parts of which still stand partially intact today. He diligently reformed the debased currency and established an official sun cult that attempted to provide a measure of religious unity across the diverse empire. Aurelian's assassination, tragically based on a secretary's false claim that the emperor intended to execute several high-ranking officers, threatened to unravel his significant achievements. Several short-lived emperors followed before Carus established a brief dynasty. While campaigning successfully against Persia, Carus allegedly died when his tent was struck by lightning. Though assassination remains a distinct possibility, his son Numerian was indeed murdered by his praetorian prefect, Aper, while returning from the Persian campaign. At Numerian's funeral, the assembled officers unanimously acclaimed Diocletian, a cavalry commander of humble Dalmatian origin, as emperor. Diocletian immediately executed Aper personally, thereby fulfilling a prophecy that he would become emperor after killing the boar, Aper in Latin. With Diocletian's accession, the protracted crisis period finally drew to a close. Although the empire had survived, it was profoundly transformed. The old Augustan Principate, with its careful balance of republican forms and imperial power, was gone. In its place stood a more overtly autocratic system where the emperor was increasingly perceived as a remote, sacred figure rather than merely first among equals. Military exigencies now utterly dominated all aspects of governance. The army had nearly doubled in size to confront multiple concurrent frontier threats, consuming an ever larger share of the state's dwindling resources. Taxation had grown heavier and more systematic to support these expanded forces. The traditional distinction between Italy and the provinces had largely vanished as the entire empire collectively shouldered similar burdens. Yet, despite the severe trauma of the 3rd century crisis, important cultural developments persisted. This period witnessed the rise of Neoplatonism through influential philosophers like Plotinus, whose mystical vision of reality would deeply influence later Christian thought. Christianity itself spread widely during these troubled decades, offering much-needed spiritual solace and a sense of community in profoundly uncertain times. The religion that had once been a persecuted minority was rapidly becoming a major force in Roman society. Roman law continued to evolve, with brilliant jurists like Ulpian and Papinian refining legal concepts that would continue to influence civilizations far beyond Rome's eventual political fall. Despite ongoing economic difficulties, Roman engineering still produced remarkable works, ranging from Aurelian's impressive walls to numerous public buildings throughout the provinces. As the 3rd century drew to a close, the empire that Diocletian inherited was wounded, but by no means defeated. The coming reforms would completely reshape Rome's government, creating a new imperial system designed to meet the evolving challenges of a changing world. The transition from the early empire of Augustus to the late Roman world was now complete, a profound transformation forged in the crucible of crisis and subsequent recovery. As Diocletian stood victorious after claiming the imperial purple, the Roman world lay utterly exhausted from a half-century of continuous crisis. Drawing crucial lessons from this prolonged turmoil, the new emperor would reshape imperial governance more dramatically than anyone since Augustus. Born into a humble family in Dalmatia on the Adriatic coast, Diocletian had ascended through military service without the traditional benefit of aristocratic connections. This outsider's perspective perhaps allowed him to perceive more clearly the systemic problems fundamentally facing Rome. The empire had grown too vast and administratively complex for a single ruler to manage effectively. Military emergencies on one distant frontier frequently required the emperor's immediate presence, just as critical crises simultaneously erupted elsewhere. Recognizing this stark reality, Diocletian undertook the unprecedented step of appointing a co-emperor. He formally elevated his trusted fellow officer, Maximian, to the rank of Augustus, assigning him direct responsibility for the western provinces while Diocletian himself meticulously focused on the more critical eastern half. This initial division, however, proved insufficient. So, Diocletian further expanded the imperial college by appointing 2 junior emperors, designated as Caesars, Galerius in the east and Constantius Chlorus in the west. This innovative system, known as the Tetrarchy or Rule of Four, strategically divided administrative responsibilities while meticulously maintaining the fiction of a unified empire. Each tetrarch governed a specific quarter of Roman territory from his own designated capital city, as Rome itself incrementally lost its former central role. The intricate arrangement also included a carefully planned system for orderly succession. After 20 years, the senior Augusti would voluntarily retire, allowing the Caesars to be promoted to Augustus and subsequently select new junior colleagues. This mechanism was specifically designed to prevent the recurring succession crises that had severely plagued the 3rd century. Beyond restructuring imperial leadership, Diocletian meticulously reorganized the empire's administrative geography. Provinces were systematically subdivided into smaller, more manageable units, nearly doubling their overall number. These newly delineated provinces were then grouped into 12 dioceses, which were themselves further organized into 4 prefectures, precisely corresponding to each tetrarch's territory. This multi-layered arrangement created multiple tiers of oversight, explicitly intended to reduce corruption and significantly improve administrative efficiency. The military also underwent a similar, comprehensive reorganization. Diocletian notably separated civil and military authority, which had traditionally been combined in provincial governors. He substantially increased the overall size of the army to effectively address multiple simultaneous frontier threats. To limit the power of potentially rebellious generals, he strategically reduced the size of provincial armies while simultaneously creating a large central mobile reserve that could rapidly respond to any crisis. These expanded military and administrative structures naturally required far greater resources. Diocletian consequently implemented a comprehensive census to accurately identify taxable wealth and individuals throughout the empire. His innovative new tax system mandated payment in kind rather than increasingly worthless currency, with set quotas of produce and goods collected from each region. To ensure the continuity of essential services, Diocletian controversially mandated hereditary occupations for certain vital professions, effectively binding sons to follow their fathers' trades. While these sweeping reforms undeniably stabilized the empire, they came at the considerable cost of significantly increased state control over individual lives. The relatively free market economy of the early empire gradually gave way to a more regulated system where the state's needs took clear precedence over private initiative. The legal distinction between honestiores, the respectable, and humiliores, the humble, became more pronounced, with different legal standards and punishments applied to each. Diocletian also attempted to address persistent economic instability through his edict on maximum prices, which set price ceilings for thousands of goods and services across the entire empire. Though undeniably well-intentioned, this measure proved virtually impossible to enforce and was ultimately abandoned. In religious matters, Diocletian initially exhibited a degree of tolerance, but later controversially launched what became infamously known as the Great Persecution against Christians. This final and most severe attempt to suppress Christianity included the widespread destruction of churches, systematic confiscation of scriptures, and the brutal execution of clergy. Despite its intense ferocity, the persecution varied significantly by region and ultimately failed to halt Christianity's inexorable spread. True to his meticulously designed succession plan, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of voluntarily retiring, compelling his co-Augustus Maximian to do the same. He spent his remaining years cultivating cabbages at his opulent palace and Split on the Dalmatian coast, reportedly telling visitors that only someone who had genuinely been emperor could truly understand the profound pleasures of retirement. However, the carefully designed tetrarchic system collapsed almost immediately after its creator's retirement. The meticulously crafted succession plans were swiftly undermined by resurgent dynastic sentiment as ambitious troops unilaterally proclaimed Constantine, son of Constantius Chlorus, and Maxentius, son of Maximian, as emperors. The ensuing years witnessed complex and bloody power struggles as various claimants fiercely fought for supremacy. Constantine ultimately emerged victorious from these protracted conflicts. According to enduring Christian tradition, before the crucial battle of the Milvian Bridge against Maxentius, Constantine experienced a profound vision of a cross in the sky emblazoned with the words, **in hoc signo vinces**, in this sign conquer. Whether motivated by genuine religious conversion or shrewd political calculation, Constantine's subsequent embrace of Christianity would irrevocably transform the Roman world. The Edict of Milan, issued jointly with his eastern colleague Licinius, formally ended the widespread persecution of Christians and diligently restored their confiscated property. Although not explicitly making Christianity the official state religion, the edict effectively granted it legal status and significant imperial favor. Constantine later decisively defeated Licinius to become the sole ruler of a reunited empire. Perhaps Constantine's most consequential decision was the establishment of a new capital city on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, dedicated as Constantinople. It occupied an unparalleled strategic position, effectively controlling the vital strait between Europe and Asia. This new Christian city, notably free from Rome's enduring pagan associations, would serve as the imperial capital for over a millennium. Constantine skillfully maintained many of Diocletian's administrative reforms while simultaneously softening their harsher aspects. He created a new gold currency, the solidus, which remarkably maintained its value for centuries, thereby bringing much-needed monetary stability after decades of rampant inflation. His religious policies largely favored Christians without directly suppressing traditional pagan worship, initiating a gradual transition that would accelerate significantly under his successors. After Constantine's death, the empire was divided among his three surviving sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. Their respective reigns were largely marked by internecine fratricidal conflict and continuing religious tensions, particularly surrounding the Arian controversy regarding Christ's divine nature. Constantius II eventually emerged as sole emperor, ruling until his death. The brief reign of Julian the Apostate, Constantine's nephew, marked the last serious attempt to restore traditional Roman religion. Raised as a Christian, but secretly converting to paganism, Julian diligently sought to revitalize classical culture and significantly reduce Christian privileges during his 18-month rule. His death while fighting the Persians definitively ended this religious counter-revolution. The emperors who succeeded Julian consistently maintained Christianity's favored position. Under Theodosius I, Christianity formally became the official state religion. The Edict of Thessalonica explicitly established Nicene Christianity as the empire's sole legitimate faith, while subsequent edicts systematically closed pagan temples and prohibited traditional sacrifices. The millennium-old religious traditions that had sustained Rome since its very founding were now officially abandoned. Theodosius I confronted significant external challenges in addition to his religious policies. His predecessor, Valens, had suffered a catastrophic defeat at Adrianople against Gothic forces, resulting in the destruction of perhaps two-thirds of the Eastern Field Army and Valens's own death. This pivotal battle unequivocally demonstrated the escalating military threat posed by Germanic peoples seeking land within the empire, rather than attempting to forcibly expel these Goths. Theodosius pragmatically settled them within imperial territory as foederati, allied troops serving under their own leaders while formally acknowledging Roman sovereignty. This practical solution provided much-needed manpower but undeniably increased the influence of semi-autonomous Germanic groups within Roman borders. The late Roman military increasingly relied on such allied contingents, and recruited heavily among Germanic peoples for its regular units as well. The common stereotype of effete Romans hiring barbarians to fight their battles is an oversimplification. Many Romans still served, and many, barbarians, were thoroughly Romanized. Nevertheless, the army's ethnic composition underwent a significant transformation from earlier centuries. Social and economic developments during this period fundamentally reflected the empire's profound transformation. Christianity reshaped cultural values, increasingly emphasizing otherworldly salvation over traditional classical civic virtues. The urban middle classes experienced a decline as imperial service and vast agricultural estates came to dominate economic life. Cities themselves physically shrank within their defensive walls as their classical monuments were often repurposed for building material or converted to Christian use. Yet, amidst these sweeping changes, remarkable cultural achievements continued to flourish. This era witnessed the burgeoning of patristic literature as influential Christian thinkers like Ambrose, Jerome, and Augustine developed sophisticated theological and philosophical systems that would profoundly influence Western thought for centuries. In the realm of law, the Theodosian Code systematically compiled imperial legislation, thereby creating a comprehensive legal reference that diligently preserved Roman jurisprudence for future generations. Upon Theodosius's death, the empire was formally divided between his two sons, Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west, though theoretically a temporary measure. This division would ultimately prove to be permanent. While the eastern and western courts maintained the fiction of a unified empire, they increasingly pursued separate interests and confronted distinct challenges. The eastern half, being wealthier and geographically better protected, would endure for another 1,000 years as what modern historians now refer to as the Byzantine Empire, although its citizens continued to proudly call themselves Romans. The western half faced existential challenges that would lead to its eventual collapse within a single lifetime. As the 4th century drew to a close, the transformed Roman state bore little resemblance to the principate established by Augustus. The emperor now ruled as an Oriental-style monarch, addressed as Dominus, Lord, rather than Princeps, first citizen. Officials bowed humbly before the imperial presence, which was increasingly secluded behind elaborate court ceremonial. Christianity had decisively displaced traditional Roman religion, fundamentally altering core assumptions about society and human purpose. Yet, for all these profound changes, the essential continuity of Roman governance remarkably remained. The empire still controlled roughly the same territories as under the Antonines. Latin and Greek continued to be the official languages of administration. Roman law still meticulously regulated daily life, and citizens continued to identify as Romans, even as the meaning of that identity evolved with changing circumstances. The stage was now set for the final, dramatic act of the Western Empire's long and illustrious history. As Germanic pressure on the frontiers intensified and internal resources dwindled, the Western emperors would confront challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The coming century would witness the end of direct Roman rule in the West, even as the eastern half adapted and remarkably survived. As the 5th century dawned, the Roman world stood formally divided between the sons of Theodosius. While technically ruling a single empire, Arcadius in Constantinople and Honorius in Milan presided over increasingly separate and divergent realms. Both young emperors relied heavily on powerful advisors, Rufinus in the east and Stilicho in the west. The resulting intricate court intrigues would further weaken imperial authority at precisely the moment when Rome faced its greatest external challenge. The primary catalyst for the impending crisis was the cataclysmic arrival of the Huns from the Eurasian steppes. Their relentless westward migration propelled Germanic peoples against, and ultimately across, the Roman frontiers in unprecedented and overwhelming numbers. The most immediate and severe threat emanated from the Goths, who, following the death of their leader Fritigern, united under an ambitious new king named Alaric. Alaric's Goths, who had been settled within the empire as foederati since their decisive victory at Adrianople, felt profoundly mistreated by imperial authorities. When their legitimate demands for better terms were rebuffed, they revolted and began moving through the Balkans. alternately negotiating with and threatening both the Eastern and Western imperial courts. Stilicho, himself of partial Vandal ancestry but thoroughly Roman in culture and unwavering loyalty, skillfully managed the Gothic threat with a combination of astute military action and delicate diplomacy. However, his earnest efforts were consistently undermined by pervasive suspicion from both imperial courts, each fearing he sought to control the entire empire himself. After Stilicho's controversial execution on spurious charges of treason, the Western Empire was left without its most capable and dedicated defender. With Stilicho tragically gone, Alaric immediately perceived an unparalleled opportunity. He invaded Italy and achieved what had not happened in 8 centuries, the devastating sack of Rome itself. Although the Goths remained in the city for only 3 days and the physical damage was relatively contained, the psychological impact on the entire Roman world was immense and profound. Jerome, writing in Bethlehem, lamented that the bright light of all the world was put out, and the whole world perished in one city. After Alaric's death shortly after the sack, the Goths moved into Gaul and eventually settled in Aquitaine as Roman federates. Meanwhile, other Germanic peoples had crossed the frozen Rhine during a particularly harsh winter, pouring en masse into Gaul and eventually Spain. These incursions included Vandals, Sueves, and Alans, who swiftly established their own independent territories within nominally Roman provinces. The Western imperial government, now strategically based in Ravenna for enhanced security compared to Rome, struggled desperately to respond effectively to these multiple and widespread incursions. Increasingly, real power resided with the Magister Militum, the supreme military commander, rather than the emperor himself, who often became a mere figurehead. For nearly 2 decades, that crucial position was held by Flavius Aetius, sometimes reverently called the last of the Romans. While Aetius diligently worked to maintain what remained of Roman authority in Gaul, a new and formidable threat simultaneously emerged in North Africa. The Vandals, under their aggressive king Gaiseric, crossed from Spain to Africa, conquering the wealthy provinces that had long supplied Rome with essential grain. By seizing Carthage, they established a powerful independent kingdom and constructed a formidable fleet that would come to dominate the western Mediterranean. As these widespread settlements of Germanic peoples within the empire were unfolding, the Western Empire faced its most fearsome opponent, Attila the Hun. Having already ravaged the eastern provinces and decisively defeated imperial armies, Attila turned westward, launching a devastating invasion of Gaul. Aetius, with remarkable effort, cobbled together a desperate coalition of Roman forces and Germanic federates, including Visigoths, that confronted the Hunnish army at the pivotal Battle of the Catalonian Plains. This desperate defense successfully halted Attila's advance in Gaul. The following year, Attila invaded Italy. Rome seemed unequivocally doomed until an embassy led by Pope Leo I somehow persuaded the Hun to withdraw. While later accounts would attribute this remarkable event to divine intervention, more practical factors likely included widespread disease within Attila's army, severe food shortages in ravaged Italy, and possibly substantial bribes from Constantinople. Attila's death shortly after this campaign and the subsequent swift collapse of Hunnish power granted Rome a brief respite. That same year, however, insidious court intrigue led to the brutal murder of Aetius on the direct orders of Emperor Valentinian III. The emperor himself was assassinated by Aetius' loyal supporters just months later, thereby tragically ending the Theodosian dynasty in the West. What followed was a rapid succession of short-lived emperors, many of whom were mere puppets of powerful military commanders. Majorian, who ruled for just a few years, represented the last serious and genuine attempt to restore Roman power in the West. His valiant efforts to rebuild the military and recover North Africa from the Vandals ultimately ended with his defeat and execution. After Majorian, Western emperors controlled little beyond Italy itself, with various Germanic kingdoms firmly establishing effective independence in former provinces. In Spain, the Sueves controlled the northwest, while Visigoths expanded their territory from Aquitaine. In Gaul, Burgundians ruled the southeast, while Franks gradually increased their power in the north. Britain, having been effectively abandoned by imperial forces decades earlier, had developed its own unique post-Roman society, increasingly influenced by Saxon settlers. By the later decades of the 5th century, the Western emperors had become largely irrelevant to most of the former provinces. Real power in Italy rested with the formidable military commander Ricimer, and after his death, with his successors Gundobad and finally Orestes. Orestes controversially installed his young son Romulus as emperor, though the boy exercised no actual authority. Germanic troops in Italy, primarily from the Syrian and Herulian tribes, demanded permanent land grants similar to those already given to federates in other provinces. When Orestes adamantly refused, they rallied behind Odoacer, a German officer in Roman service. Odoacer overthrew Orestes and formally deposed Romulus, thereby ending the charade of imperial rule in the West. In a pragmatic solution, Odoacer sent the imperial regalia to Emperor Zeno in Constantinople, clearly signaling that a separate Western emperor was no longer necessary. He requested and received the title of patrician, governing Italy nominally as Zeno's viceroy, but effectively as an independent king. Romulus, still a teenager, was mercifully permitted to retire to a country estate with a generous pension, an unexpectedly merciful end for a deposed ruler. This specific moment is traditionally marked as the fall of Rome, or, more accurately, the end of the Western Roman Empire. Yet, for people living through these momentous events, there was no dramatic or sudden collapse. Many of the fundamental structures of Roman life continued to exist under new management. Germanic kings issued laws based on Roman models, maintained some form of tax system, and frequently employed Roman administrators. Several factors contributed to the Western Empire's failure to withstand the immense pressures that its eastern counterpart successfully navigated. The West faced more exposed land frontiers and consequently more frequent invasions. Its economy had been less urbanized and more agrarian than the East's. Even in better times, the wealthy provinces of North Africa and parts of Gaul that had sustained Western finances were lost to the Vandals and Visigoths, creating a spiraling decline in available resources. Western emperors also suffered from a significant deficit of legitimacy compared to their Eastern colleagues. The constant civil wars and rapid turnover of rulers profoundly undermined confidence in imperial authority. After the traumatic sack of Rome, the psychological foundation of the empire, the deeply held belief in Rome's eternal destiny, was severely damaged in the West. Yet, even as direct imperial rule faded, Romanitas, or Roman culture and identity, remarkably endured. Latin remained the language of administration and literacy. The Catholic Church meticulously preserved Roman organizational structures and many foundational legal concepts. Aqueducts still carried water, and people still gathered in forums. Even as new Germanic lords ruled from former imperial palaces. The end of the Western Empire, therefore, did not signify the end of the Roman world itself. In the East, the empire continued to flourish from its magnificent capital at Constantinople. The Emperor Zeno and his successors proudly considered themselves the legitimate rulers of the entire Roman world, including the lost western provinces that they harbored hopes of someday recovering. In Italy itself, Odoacer's rule would prove to be relatively brief. Emperor Zeno authorized Theodoric, king of the Ostrogoths, to invade Italy and depose Odoacer. After defeating and eventually murdering his rival, Theodoric established a kingdom that represented one of the most successful syntheses of Roman and Germanic elements in the post-imperial West. As the western provinces commenced their gradual transformation into what would eventually become medieval Europe, the enduring idea of Rome retained its powerful grip on the human imagination. Germanic kings often sought formal recognition from Constantinople and coveted Roman titles. The Church increasingly filled the administrative vacuum left by imperial retreat. And far to the east, the Roman Empire, now predominantly Greek-speaking and Christian, but still proudly calling itself Roman, continued to uphold the magnificent legacy of Augustus and Constantine. The end of the Western Roman Empire thus marks not a cataclysmic or sudden collapse, but rather a significant transition point in a much longer and more complex process of transformation. The political structure originally created by Augustus 5 centuries earlier had finally failed in the West. But Roman civilization, much like a great river dividing around an obstacle, would continue flowing through new and distinct channels into the nascent medieval world, while the Western Roman Empire slowly faded into history. Its eastern counterpart continued to thrive and adapt. The citizens of this surviving realm never referred to themselves as Byzantine, a term inventively coined by modern historians. They proudly identified as Romans, in their increasingly Greek speech, viewing themselves as the rightful and true inheritors of Caesar and Constantine. For nearly a millennium after the formal deposition of Romulus Augustulus, this Eastern Roman Empire would diligently preserve and profoundly transform the enduring legacy of Rome. As the 5th century drew to a close, Emperor Zeno faced significant challenges. Religious controversies concerning the precise nature of Christ deeply divided Eastern Christians. While Isaurian countrymen from Zeno's mountainous homeland largely dominated the court, this bred considerable resentment among Constantinople's indigenous population. Yet, despite these internal frictions, the empire remained remarkably intact, characterized by efficient tax collection, a professional administration, and a level of military security that the fragmented West could only envy. Zeno's successor, Anastasius, provided 27 years of highly capable governance. His meticulous financial stewardship replenished the imperial treasury, while his extensive construction of the long walls effectively protected Constantinople's landward approaches. Although religious tensions persisted during his reign, Anastasius successfully maintained the empire's strategic position against Sasanian Persia, its traditional formidable rival in the east. The true golden age of the Eastern Roman Empire arrived with the momentous accession of Justinian I, born to Latin-speaking peasants in the Balkan provinces. Justinian famously married the remarkable Theodora, whose journey from an actress of questionable reputation to imperial consort initially scandalized conservative circles, but ultimately brought a shrewd, determined, and intelligent partner to the throne. Justinian's ambition was nothing short of the audacious restoration of imperial unity across the Mediterranean. He dispatched his brilliant general Belisarius to undertake the daunting task of recovering North Africa from the Vandals. Belisarius accomplished this mission with remarkable speed and efficiency, successfully returning the wealthy grain-producing region to imperial control. Emboldened by this initial success, Justinian then authorized the invasion of Ostrogothic Italy. The Italian campaign, however, proved to be far more arduous and protracted than initially anticipated. What was envisioned as a swift reconquest devolved into a brutal 20-year struggle that utterly devastated the peninsula, although imperial forces eventually prevailed, capturing Ravenna and decisively defeating the last Gothic resistance. The human and economic cost was enormous. Italy, once the very heart of Roman power, lay economically ruined. Parts of Spain were also eventually recovered, but Justinian's grand dream of full Western restoration largely remained elusive. These extensive military campaigns severely stretched imperial resources, which were already strained by ongoing warfare with Persia. The situation dramatically worsened when bubonic plague reached Constantinople, tragically killing perhaps 40% of the city's inhabitants, and subsequently spreading throughout the entire Mediterranean basin. This demographic catastrophe significantly reduced tax revenues and military recruitment, creating profound fiscal problems that would continue to plague Justinian's successors. Despite these immense challenges, Justinian's reign witnessed truly remarkable achievements. The magnificent Church of Hagia Sophia, with its revolutionary dome spanning 108 feet, remains one of the world's architectural marvels to this day. Even more enduring and significant was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive compilation and reform of Roman law that meticulously preserved classical legal principles for future generations. This monumental legal code would eventually form the fundamental basis of many European legal systems and stands as one of Rome's most significant and lasting legacies to the modern world. After Justinian's death, the empire entered a difficult and tumultuous period. His successor, Justin II, lost much of Italy to the Lombards, while renewed warfare with Persia further drained precious resources. Subsequent emperors, Tiberius II and Maurice, valiantly maintained imperial defenses but struggled immensely with diminishing resources. Maurice's attempts to reform the military ultimately led to his overthrow and brutal execution by the usurper Phocas. The 7th century brought unprecedented and existential challenges to the empire. Under Shah Khosrow II, Persia launched massive invasions, capturing Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia. Jerusalem fell, and the true cross, the most sacred of Christian relics, was carried to the Persian capital as a trophy. Persian forces even reached the Bosphorus, directly opposite Constantinople itself. In this moment of supreme crisis, one of Rome's greatest emperors emerged, Heraclius, who had successfully overthrown the tyrant Phocas. Personally led the imperial counterattack. In a series of brilliant and audacious campaigns, he drove deep into Persian territory, forcing a peace treaty that restored all lost provinces and the true cross. This stunning reversal appeared to secure Rome's eastern frontier permanently. Yet, even as Heraclius celebrated his triumph, a new and formidable power was rapidly emerging in the Arabian desert. United by the Prophet Muhammad and profoundly inspired by the new faith of Islam, Arab armies erupted into Roman and Persian territories with astonishing speed and devastating effectiveness. The already exhausted Persian Empire collapsed entirely under the onslaught, while Roman forces suffered a crushing defeat at the decisive Battle of Yarmouk. Within a single decade, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, provinces that had been Roman for over 6 centuries, fell definitively under Islamic rule. This catastrophic loss of territory irrevocably transformed the empire. The remaining realm became more compact and defensible, primarily centered on Constantinople, Western Asia Minor, and the southern Balkans. Greek definitively replaced Latin as the official language of administration, while the empire itself adopted a more explicitly Christian character. Modern historians often designate this 7th century transformation as the transition from the Eastern Roman to the Byzantine Empire, although contemporaries perceived no such clear division. Despite these massive territorial losses, the empire remarkably adapted and survived. The innovative theme system, which reorganized provinces into military districts where soldier farmers defended their own lands, proved to be an exceptionally effective response to constant Arab raids. Greek fire, a mysterious incendiary weapon that could burn even on water, provided imperial fleets with a crucial technological advantage in defending Constantinople. When Arab forces twice besieged Constantinople itself, the formidable defenses of the city held firm. The failure of these prolonged sieges marked a critical turning point, effectively preserving the empire as a Christian bulwark in the eastern Mediterranean and arguably saving much of Europe from Islamic conquest. The 8th and early 9th centuries brought intense controversies over religious imagery, a period historically known as the iconoclastic period. Emperors from Leo III to Theophilus banned the veneration of icons, viewing them as dangerously close to idol worship. This controversial policy deeply divided society and strained relations with Rome and other Western Christians, who continued to revere sacred images. The eventual restoration of icons healed these internal divisions and ushered in a vibrant period of cultural and intellectual revival. Under the Macedonian dynasty, founded by Basil I, the empire progressively regained its strength and influence. Agricultural production significantly increased, cities revived, and military fortunes dramatically improved. Emperors like Nikephoros Phocas and John Cymis successfully recaptured territories in Syria, while Basil II earned the grim sobriquet, Bulgar Slayer, for his ruthless campaigns that brought all of the Balkans firmly under imperial rule. This resurgent Rome, albeit now Greek in language and culture, represented the most powerful, wealthy, and sophisticated society in the entire Christian world. Constantinople, with an estimated 500,000 inhabitants, vastly dwarfed the modest towns of Western Europe. Its bustling markets featured exotic goods from as far away as China and Scandinavia. Its majestic churches gleamed with intricate mosaics, and its scholars meticulously preserved ancient texts that were largely unknown in the West. Yet, beneath this golden facade, insidious structural weaknesses were gradually developing. The free peasantry that had formed the backbone of the theme armies progressively lost their land to expanding aristocratic estates. Civil service positions increasingly became hereditary rather than merit-based. Religious differences with the Latin West widened, culminating in the Great Schism that formally divided Christianity into distinct Catholic and Orthodox branches. The pivotal disaster came at Manzikert, where Seljuk Turks decisively defeated Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes and consequently opened Anatolia, the empire's heartland, to widespread Turkish settlement. Simultaneously, Normans conquered the last imperial possessions in Italy, and Pecheneg conducted devastating raids across the Danube. The empire that had appeared triumphant just decades earlier now fought desperately for its very survival. The desperate appeal for Western aid by Emperor Alexios I Komnenos played a crucial role in triggering the First Crusade. While Crusaders did establish several short-lived states in the Holy Land, tensions between Latins and Greeks grew increasingly bitter and resentful. The Fourth Crusade famously and tragically diverted its course to Constantinople itself, mercilessly sacking the greatest Christian city in the world and establishing a short-lived Latin empire on its ruins. Although imperial forces eventually recaptured Constantinople under Michael VIII Palaiologos, the restored empire was but a shadow of its former glorious self. Italian merchant republics dominated its economy, while Serbian and Bulgarian states aggressively carved away significant Balkan territories. Most importantly, Turkish emirates controlled the vast majority of Anatolia, with the aggressive Ottoman state rapidly emerging as the greatest existential threat. The Ottoman Turks crossed into Europe, gradually encircling Constantinople. Despite desperate diplomatic efforts to secure Western aid, support proved minimal and largely ineffective. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos faced a massive Ottoman army of Sultan Mehmed II with only a few thousand defenders when the final siege began in April 1453. For 7 grueling weeks, the ancient and formidable walls of Constantinople bravely withstood relentless Ottoman cannon fire. On May 29, the final assault broke through. Constantine XI Palaiologos allegedly discarded his imperial regalia and died fighting valiantly alongside his soldiers as the city irrevocably fell. Mehmed II rode triumphantly to Hagia Sophia, which was immediately converted into a mosque on that same day. The Roman Empire, which had endured for 1,480 years since the accession of Augustus, finally came to an end. Yet, its profound legacy lived on in many diverse forms. The Ottoman sultans styled themselves as Caesars of Rome, ruling over much of the former Byzantine territory. Moscow claimed the mantle of the Third Rome, preserving Orthodox Christianity and imperial traditions. Renaissance Italy rediscovered classical texts diligently preserved by Byzantine scholars who fled westward before and after Constantinople's fall. Most significantly, the Byzantine Empire had served as the crucial intellectual and cultural bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. It meticulously preserved Roman law, Greek philosophy, and early Christian theology through centuries when these might otherwise have been tragically lost to the Western tradition. Its elaborate diplomacy, sophisticated bureaucracy, and complex economy provided invaluable models far beyond its own borders. The epic story that commenced with Romulus on the Palatine Hill had finally concluded. But Rome, in its broadest sense, never truly fell, it transformed. As one considers this long history, one can imagine the echoes of Roman civilization continuing through the laws we follow, the languages we speak, the buildings we admire, and countless other aspects of our modern world that would be utterly unrecognizable without the enduring and pervasive legacy of Rome. Although the last emperor bearing the title of Caesar ultimately fell with Constantinople in 1453, Rome's profound influence continues to echo through the centuries to our present day. Let us reflect on the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization that has shaped our world in countless, often subtle, ways. Perhaps Rome's most significant and lasting contribution lies in the fundamental realm of law and governance. The Romans developed a highly sophisticated legal system that moved far beyond the limited scope of earlier codes to effectively address the increasingly complex needs of a diverse, cosmopolitan society. Concepts that we now take for granted, such as the presumption of innocence, the paramount importance of intent in criminal acts, and the clear distinction between civil and criminal law, all bear unmistakable Roman fingerprints. Justinian's monumental legal compilation, the Corpus Juris Civilis, preserved these fundamental principles throughout the medieval period and into the modern era. When European nations developed their own distinct legal systems in the late medieval and early modern periods, they drew heavily and directly on this rich Roman inheritance. Today, the civil law tradition that governs most of continental Europe, Latin America, and significant parts of Africa and Asia derives directly and fundamentally from Roman models. Even the common law tradition of England and its former colonies, while developing independently in many respects, absorbed numerous Roman legal concepts. Beyond specific legal provisions, Rome pioneered innovative practices of public administration that would profoundly influence later states. The Romans systematically created a professional civil service, implemented systematic record-keeping, standardized weights and measures, conducted regular censuses, and established sophisticated tax systems. While these innovations might appear mundane in isolation, they collectively formed the essential infrastructure that allowed complex societies to function effectively, and on a large scale. The very idea of citizenship, a formal legal status conferring specific rights and responsibilities, owes a substantial debt to Roman practice. Rome's gradual and strategic extension of citizenship to conquered peoples offered a pragmatic and effective path to integration that helped sustain the empire for centuries. This model of earned inclusion, though imperfectly implemented in practice, provided a compelling alternative to the strict ethnic exclusivity that characterized many ancient states. In the realm of language and literature, Rome's impact remains utterly inescapable. Latin, initially the rustic speech of farmers on the Tiber's banks, eventually became the lingua franca of Western civilization for over a millennium. Though no longer spoken as a native first language, Latin's direct descendants, the Romance languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian, are native tongues for nearly 1 billion people today. Even languages not directly descended from Latin bear its profound influence through centuries of extensive borrowing. English, for instance, though Germanic in its basic grammatical structure, derives approximately 60% of its vast vocabulary from Latin, either directly or indirectly through French. Scientific, legal, and technical terminology throughout the world remains predominantly Latin-based, providing a common and precise vocabulary across linguistic boundaries. Roman literature established enduring forms and profound themes that would continue to resonate throughout Western literary tradition. Virgil's epic Aeneid became a foundational touchstone for later poets, from Dante to Milton. Ovid's inventive mythological narratives in the Metamorphoses influenced Shakespeare and countless other writers across the centuries. Cicero's masterful rhetoric provided seminal models for political oratory, while Seneca's philosophical works and tragedies significantly shaped Renaissance drama. The eloquent letters of Pliny the Younger and the incisive histories of Tacitus continue to influence how we understand the very purpose and methods of these literary genres. The physical legacy of Rome remains equally impressive and visible. Roman engineering transformed the Mediterranean landscape with an infrastructure network of unprecedented scale and sophistication. Many Roman roads still form the fundamental basis of modern highways, their carefully planned routes proving optimal even with today's advanced technology. Aqueducts meticulously built by Roman engineers continued to supply fresh water to cities like Segovia in Spain well into the 20th century. Roman architectural innovations, particularly their brilliant refinement of the arch, vault, and dome, made possible the construction of buildings of a scale and permanence previously unimaginable in the ancient world. Their revolutionary development of concrete allowed for the creation of structures that have miraculously endured 2 millennia of earthquakes, floods, and warfare. The Pantheon in Rome, with its perfect dome featuring an oculus open to the sky, remains one of the world's architectural marvels, inspiring buildings from the Renaissance to the present day. In military affairs, Rome's legacy is similarly profound and influential. The legion, a highly flexible and professional fighting force combining heavily armed infantry with specialized units, provided a model that would profoundly influence armed forces for centuries to come. Roman emphasis on rigorous discipline, systematic training, ingenious engineering, and precise logistics, rather than mere raw courage or overwhelming numbers, set standards that later successful armies would consistently emulate. Military strategists and historians today still diligently study Caesar's brilliant campaigns as prime exemplars of strategic and tactical genius. Rome's profound political legacy presents a more intricate and nuanced picture. The Roman Republic, with its intricate system of checks and balances, clear separation of powers, and fixed term limits, profoundly influenced the framers of many modern constitutions, particularly America's founding fathers. Yet, Rome also starkly demonstrated how republican institutions could be insidiously subverted by ambitious individuals, and how liberty might be willingly traded for the perceived benefits of security and stability. The imperial system that ultimately replaced the republic similarly offered both positive and negative lessons for later generations. At its very best, the Roman Empire provided effective governance, widespread security, and tangible prosperity to diverse populations across 3 continents. At its worst, it starkly demonstrated the inherent dangers of autocracy, the corrupting influence of absolute power, and the perennial challenges of maintaining unity across vast territories and disparate cultures. Christianity, now the world's largest religion, owes its global spread significantly to the Roman context in which it originally developed. Early Christians skillfully utilized Roman roads, ships, and established urban networks to efficiently disseminate their message. After Constantine's pivotal conversion, the imperial administrative framework provided a practical template for ecclesiastical organization, with dioceses often corresponding precisely to Roman provincial boundaries. Even the title, Pontifex Maximus, once held by Roman emperors as chief priests of the state religion, later passed to the popes who lead the Catholic Church. Rome's remarkable cultural achievement lay not solely in its original contributions but significantly in its unparalleled genius for synthesis and transmission. Roman artists, philosophers, and scientists frequently adapted Greek models, but in doing so, they meticulously preserved and transmitted Greek achievements to subsequent civilizations. Without Rome as a crucial intermediary, much of classical Greek thought might have been tragically lost to the Western tradition entirely. The very idea of Rome itself became a powerful and enduring symbol long after the empire's political fall. Throughout the medieval and early modern periods, political leaders eagerly sought to claim the Roman mantle. Charlemagne's coronation as Roman emperor in 800 CE, the Byzantine ruler's persistent identity as Romae, the Russian Tsars claimed to be heirs of the Third Rome, and the Habsburg Holy Roman Empire all vividly reflect Rome's potent symbolic legacy. Even Nazi architecture and Mussolini's fascist imagery consciously evoked Roman imperial grandeur, demonstrating the persistent, if sometimes profoundly misused, power of Roman symbolism. Perhaps most fundamentally, Rome bequeathed to later civilizations a truly cosmopolitan vision. The revolutionary idea that diverse peoples could effectively participate in a shared cultural and political community, while still maintaining significant aspects of their distinct identities. Though imperfectly realized in practice, this Roman ideal of a world brought together under common law and shared citizenship, rather than perpetually divided by ethnic or religious boundaries, remains a powerful and aspirational goal in our own increasingly interconnected global society. Rome also vividly demonstrated both the remarkable heights humanity can achieve and the profound depths to which it can tragically sink. The same civilization that produced the profound wisdom of Marcus Aurelius also featured the egregious excesses of Caligula. The society that meticulously built the Pantheon also staged the brutal and barbaric gladiatorial games. This complex and often contradictory legacy reminds us that human achievements are always inherently mixed with human failings, and that civilization itself is always both inspiring and deeply flawed. As one reflects on this, imagine how profoundly different our world would be without Rome's enduring and pervasive influence. Our legal systems and the very languages we speak, our architecture and engineering marvels, our political institutions and religious organizations, all would be profoundly and irrevocably transformed without the foundational Roman experience. From seemingly mundane details like the names of our months to profound and complex questions about citizenship and governance, Rome has fundamentally shaped how we understand ourselves and our place within society. The Roman story, spanning more than 2 millennia from its mythical founding by Romulus to the fall of Constantinople, offers a grand and sweeping epic of human achievement, resilience, and remarkable adaptation. Through countless rises and falls, glorious triumphs and devastating disasters, the Roman world continually evolved while meticulously maintaining deep connections to its profound past. Even after the empire ceased to exist as a unified political entity, its pervasive shadow continued to influence everything that followed in the Western world and beyond. As one concludes this narrative, one can take comfort in this profound continuity of human experience. The very same stars that shone over Augustus as he transformed Rome from a city of brick to a city of marble now shine upon us. The same fundamental human hopes, fears, and dreams that motivated Romans for security, prosperity, meaning, and beauty continue to motivate us still in the modern era. In that shared humanity lies perhaps Rome's most profound and enduring legacy.